Hey, welcome back to the Midday Q&A. I'm your host, the Duckman. We're back today with my Volkswagen bus behind me. After I finished installing the rear suspension on there, I got more questions instead of hate. People really wanted to know specifically, where did I get my spring plates from? And I did try to make a video during the week where I was working on them. I had about an hour here and an hour there, and most of the work was done inside the garage rather than outside for a change, so I was mostly running tools. But yeah, I actually made the plates. We're gonna get into that in just a second. When I first tell you about what I made them from, it's gonna break the hearts of many. There were a lot of people that were requesting my old stock spring plates, and well, unfortunately I had to cut them. But before we get to any of that, please like, and comment, subscribe, pluck that dingle belly, that way you get updates every time I upload a video. And don't forget to check out duckshit.net for all my different social media links. Classic Car Creations, by the way, duckshit.net/CCC. You can see Earl working on Eleanor right now. He's making some huge progress, and it's just great to see what happened. He sandblasted the whole car, and you could see where I got a little too crazy with my grinding and wore some of the metal thin, and the sandblaster just blew a hole right through it. I'm a little embarrassed, but it's okay. She's in good hands, and Earl has said it more than once, and I know because I trust him. So Eleanor's gonna come back just absolutely gorgeous. So anyways, we'll be back right after the intro. All right, well, we're back, and I gotta say once again that I just absolutely love this 7-foot tripod. This thing is just awesome for somebody like me. It makes me not look so tall anymore, and it makes it a whole lot easier for me to shoot way off into the distance. Rather than shooting up, it shoots down, so you guys can see more land versus seeing so far up in the sky. Well, this is the spring plate from a Beetle, and as you know, I put Beetle IRS suspension on the bus. So what I had to do is I had to take those long spring plates and I had to cut them down. I came up with this, and this turned out pretty nice. Now, for those of you that are looking at this, those with a keen eye, will notice that the Beetle spring plate here is not only thinner, or at least this will be height-wise anyway, they stand up this way. The thickness this way is actually the same. The length of them is identical, but the holes where I cut them are actually offset on this plate here. And the reason for that is, and it's actually one of the reasons why it was binding up when I started to put the trailing arm on there when I put the bolts through, is because, and I just didn't think about it, but when you put this in, if it's going to be up, it's going to be up at a slight angle. So it's causing this bolt to bind. So what I need to do is enlarge in this hole a little bit, so that way it could be in there. But why did I cut it offset? Well, because this is now a dropped spring plate. And the approximate ½ inch that this is essentially been raised is going to cause the suspension out here to drop about 1 inch. So that'll require me to cut less out of it to avoid the bump stop on the top in the event that I want to lower it even more. So we'll see what happens with that. I haven't decided yet, but that's one of the reasons why that hole was binding up, and I didn't think about it until after I was done. But yeah, that's what happens, is this comes up that way. And that's going to affect my camber too. If the thing is cocked this way, it's going to cause the wheel to have an extreme negative camber. If I bring it down this way, it'll have more of a positive camber, and it'll bring it out the other way. So that is something that I do need to address, and we'll see what happens. If I'm not happy with the camber on the things, there's other ways to fix camber. Even though it's essentially not adjustable on these, I'm going to build adjustability into it. Now, you know the 944 rear suspension that's on Eleanor, the camber on that can be set. There's actually a hole, which you see, so it's very similar to the hole that's on the 944 rear spring plate, and there's a tool that goes into it, and you can turn it, and you can actually adjust the camber. And what it does is it just scissors your trailing arm against your spring plate. And this motion, even though it's like this, it's kind of hard to believe, but that whole arm that goes in here will twist. And as a result, it'll adjust the camber of your wheel. And it's not much. It's maybe a degree plus or minus or some shit like that. I don't know. It's not a whole lot. It really isn't. In fact, I've got the adjustment maxed out on it right now because I've got the back lowered, and it still cambers in a way that I'm not happy with it, so I might play with it in the future. But that's the spring plate. And how did I make this? Well, you see, this design is very similar. My idea was to copy the Beetle one. And as you know, the torsion bars are not the same. Beetle torsion bar here is the skinny one. The bus torsion bar is a thick one. But the bus torsion bars are shorter by about, I think it was 3.5 inches is the total that it came out to. Now what's interesting is that this offset is roughly 3.5 inches shorter on this guy. So what I could have done is I could have run some 944 torsion bars, which could have come in 30mm thickness like this, and I could have run a long one. The splines on the outside are the same as the splines on the inside, or I have that backwards. The splines on the inside of the bus are the same as the outside splines on the 944 or Beetle torsion bar. So what I could have done is I essentially could have put this torsion bar in backwards, and then this would have no longer engaged with this side. So what I could have done, again, is taken the torsion bar center that I cut out of Eleanor when I put those adjusters in, and cut this down the middle, cut the end off, weld this piece onto here, and now I can use a big, thick, long torsion bar in reverse. And that would have been a whole lot easier to manufacture than these damn things were, because these were a pain in the ass. But why didn't I do that? Well, I'm just not interested in putting in very expensive torsion bars, and these are to the sum of about $350 to get ones that I needed of the thickness that I was looking for. Whereas the original bus ones, these were about 200 bucks for a pair, and that sucked. I really didn't want to have to buy new ones, but it's just it's so stupid that these rusted and that these things are compromised like they are that I can't use them. But gotta do what you gotta do. Unfortunately, those are toast. So anyway, I took this spring plate, and as you know, I cut the end off of it. What I did is I laid the two side by side, I measured the length, and then I cut it off accordingly. Now you might also notice that this one, unfortunately, this is a, which side is this? This is a right side. And the reason I can tell is there's two on the bottom. I see it as like the plane, it's the earth. These two are almost in line with each other. If it's the opposite way, the holes would be in the opposite direction. But I've only got the one. I can't find the other one. The other reason why I didn't reverse them. So it's going to take me a whole lot less time to just fix what I've got. So we use these. Now you might say, well, you know, how did you get the hole pattern reversed on that if you didn't have the other one? Well, the answer is just flip it over and cut it out. So that wasn't too bad. But in order to make these, I took the stock spring plate, cut it off, then I cut off the torsion bar splined retainer, which is actually up in here. Hot, 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 hot. I just hacked it off with a Sawzall. This is all hardened steel, by the way. It was quite to my surprise at how the Sawzall cut through it without destroying the blade. Now I'm looking around to see what kind of tubing that I needed to extend this out, and I forget what the diameter of it is. It's like 2¼ inches, 2½ inches, something like that. And then the bright light went over my head. I have a whole bunch of old Beetle pans that are here in the yard. Some of them have rusted out beams on them, so I figured I could just cut a piece of the tube out of that, which just happened to be the right diameter. And it's actually designed for a torsion suspension. So I cut it out to the proper length, and then I turned it in my lathe to make sure it was nice and even on both sides, so it was nice and straight. Then I put some notches into the tube and into the end piece where the splines engage. And I made them so they lock together. They actually fit together in such a way that they can't twist. They're now an interference fit. It gave me some nice gaps to pull the weld up into for everything just to be melded together. And the other big advantage is once the thing is heated with the welds and it shrinks back down, it's going to pull that back into place. I did the same thing on the other end. I used a blade that was about the size of a quarter, and I cut 4 slots right into the spring plate because this portion of it was still attached. And then I simply cut the back side of the tube once again, interference fit it, and then I installed it on the bus without it being fully welded just yet to make sure that everything aligned properly, using the torsion bar as a guide with the rubber gogi on the back side of it to keep everything aligned. Once I had that into place, tacked it around, pulled it back out, shoved it in the vise, made sure it's nice and tight, and ran the weld all the way around the thing. Then, of course, finished cutting out my bits in here. Got that all cut out. I used a drill press, measured out where my slots were supposed to be by just laying them together, drilled out both ends, and then using a couple of grinding bits, ground out the middle. For the most part, it worked out pretty good. That finished my spring plate design, and I had that working, and it fit, and it seemed like it was going to be okay. But now that the spring plate is offset. It sticks out now. I think it's 2.5 inches. I really don't remember. It was, you know what? No, it was 2.5 inches before I put the castellated ends on it. So there's about 1/4 inch this way, 1/4 inch going into that way. So roughly it's about 2 inches in offset that I built into that. But that means my spring plates weren't going to fit. So I had to cut a hole in it. And that was as simple as, well, just running the 2.5 inch hole saw into it. And 2.5 inch hole saw allows that to fit over just like that. And actually there's supposed to be, once again, another rubber gogie that fits over that. And then it all fits together just like that. And it also makes it watertight for what it's worth. Now the end of this here, I'm going to have to put a cap on it. And I'm going to do the same thing I did on Eleanor. Just get a nice little rubber cap that slides over it, grease the hell out of it, and slide it right over to keep the water from getting into the torsion bar and stop the splines from rusting, which is kind of the problem that we had when the torsion tube had flooded on this thing. Once I had the hole saw in there, I cleaned it up, I put it on the lathe, and I was kind of surprised I was able to chuck it and just simply cut it out. And it's kind of funny that everything worked out as well as it did, and I didn't have a single amateur mishap. I hope A-Bomb sees that one. So everything came together, as you saw on this bus, that it looks good. Everything fits together nicely. Everything has an adjustability. The only problem that I'm not happy with is, I said, I had to open these holes up and slot them out a little bit, not by much. You know, maybe if I cut an additional 1/8 of an inch, maybe even a whole 1/4 of an inch, I'll just get in there with a grinding bit and just run it out. This is spring steel, by the way, really hard to cut. After digging through my drill bits, I managed to find some good drill bits that got the job done and had a passing grade and drilled right through this thing pretty cleanly. So I turned out pretty good on that. I was rather surprised also that the lathe did as good of a job on it. But I was using a carbide tip on there, and I cleaned up that weld the whole way around. I didn't want to take off too much of it, but I just took off, you know, where it was lumpy and ugly, because on here, once again, we're going to put that seal, and I wanted it to keep the water out and fit snugly. There's also, I don't know if you can see it, I've been calling it the the little dicky end, because it kind of has a little dick head on it. I don't know if you can really see it, but it does bulge out a little bit, so that way when the cap fits over it, it has a little flange for it to grab onto. I did the one on the passenger side, the right-hand side, a little bit better than this one, I think, but I think I'm happy with it. This should work out real nicely. As you saw, everything fit together. Just going to need a little bit of modification, and it'll work out well. Here's the spring plate pieces that I cut off. Because these are spring steel, they could be used for a lot of different things, so I'm going to hang on to these. I don't know what I'll use them for, but I can make all kinds of different tools and things out of them. So these might be just important someday. But yeah, I broke a lot of hearts by cutting these spring plates, because I was asked for these spring plates off of this bus more than anything that I've taken off of this thing. I mean, some people wanted the transmission and the reduction boxes, but everybody wanted these damn spring plates. These things must be harder to find than I thought. But yeah, they weren't going to work for me in their current state, and I can't buy these because this is custom. Who knows what they're going to be measured to? You know, I mean, I probably could have had somebody make them if I would have just measured the offset and everything else and go nuts, but no, I made my own. So these worked out nice, and once again, I am just overjoyed. But it's just funny how similar they look. I think I did a pretty damn good job, even though I did all my cutting by hand. Yeah, everything except the lathe, but that's how I made the polished end on there, and it turned out pretty nice. Yep. So anyway, I hope that clarifies the questions on that. And I'm probably going to answer a little more Q&A as to why I narrowed this thing, because there's some more things that are going to come into play on this that are kind of important to think about. And I thought about them in advance, and not everybody understands what it is I'm going for or why these things were important. So there will be another Q&A video. I don't know if it'll be this week, it might be next week. And we'll talk a little bit more about the narrowing of the rear suspension on here. So anyways, you guys, licky, likey, comment, subscribe. Don't forget to pluck that dingle belly. Check out duckshit.net/CCC for Earl at Classic Car Creations. Check out duckshit.net for all of my different social media links. And if you'd like to buy some Duckman merch, and no, I'm not wearing it today, but I was in yesterday's video, check out duckshit.net/store. Or just go to duckshit.net and find the link for the store. I've also got a Patreon, you guys, if you want to help support me. Some of the things that I've done is taking measurements of trailing arms, and I'm going to be sharing some of that data up on Patreon. So if you need to build a custom Beetle or even a bus, and you need to figure out how wide these trailing arms are, how heavy the brakes are, what the best application is with the amount of offset, I have a data sheet that I've created, and I think I may have created a sheet with compiled data more data on rear brakes between Porsche, Beetle, Bus, and different braking applications than anybody else on the internet ever had. So it's kind of nice to have that all in one place, and I find myself hitting that sheet once in a while, and that's probably one of the reasons why I got everything to fit on this with the first try. Just those measurements that I've collected over all these years really made a huge difference. If you watch my trailing arm video where I talked about the Porsche 944 trailing arms, I actually built that Excel spreadsheet then, and I imported a whole bunch of data to it, and now the data sheet is 3 times the size that it used to be. So I'm tooting my own horn. Yeah, I've got a lot of great data, and I'll be referring to that sheet a lot. And of course, if you want it, hit me up on Patreon. You'll find it up there. All right, you guys, thanks for watching. Once again, really appreciate it. We're gonna get back to work, try to put the other side together, and next, we're gonna start tearing up the front end. And you might have already even seen that video. I don't know what order I'm releasing them in. Thanks for watching, you guys. Really appreciate it.